Hi, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. With me today is Anthony Gaskell, who's the Director of Reputation.com, who we're very thankful is sponsoring today's webinar. Our topic today is around reputation management. It's often said that a good reputation takes years to build but can be lost in seconds. I think that's probably even more true in today's online economy. When we think about people ruining brand reputation, we think of people like Ratner's and what they did back in the 80s. But actually, I think nowadays it's probably even more important when you have so many new brands being created and new businesses being developed. You just have to look at Just Eat and how that's been caught up and overtaken by Deliveroo over the last wee while, when we thought Just Eat was going to be around for years. So today, Anthony's going to take us through some advice and tactics on how to improve your brand reputation. The format's going to be a presentation, and then we'll have some questions afterwards, which hopefully will come from you. And if not, then hopefully we'll make some up in the room ourselves between us. Just a few bits and pieces to go through before we get going then, so I'll encourage everyone please to tweet using the hashtag DMA events. If at any point you lose the sound from the speakers, then please write in the group message box and we'll notify us and we'll make sure we change the microphone and make sure that works. If you do have any questions, please write them in the question box. We'll have a bit of time. Upload the today afterwards. I think that would find it very useful. We'll see. We've asked to set it on that PDF. Yeah. He's the father of the best fabric opportunity and reputations companies by mobility industry, including automotive, hospitality, retail, to drive more revenue by business control of that reputation. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Trends, and I guess that's just our take on how the internet's starting to take shape and how that's impacting from a reputational point of view businesses of today. I'll then get into the meaty part of today's presentation and try to walk you through what we would say the 3 steps to improving online reputation management looks like. I've then got a short excerpt from a case study, a rather large case study, which I've condensed just to get across the key points, which starts to help you understand, I guess, the return on investment from managing this space. We'll conclude with just a brief on everything that we've covered in respect of online reputation management, and then of course we'll finish up in respect of a Q&A to cover things off. So if I just begin by setting the scene in respect of Reputation.com, the business was founded in 2006. Now, our founder, a guy called Michael Furtick, was a bit of a visionary back in 2006, and in some senses his first idea was all about just allowing people and businesses to take control of what existed online. Now that progressed somewhat over the years, and in about 2011 through to 2012 we launched the platform to which supports somewhere in the region of about 500,000 businesses across 70 to 80 different sectors or so. Now that platform today supports businesses to manage millions of pieces of feedback, whether it be in a review environment or in a social environment or just general customer experience, engagement and feedback. We are a truly global organisation. HQ is in Silicon Valley in the US. I'm of course based in the UK and lead that business, but we've also got operations throughout Europe, being Spain, France, and a number of other places not to list now. As a software provider, there's a number of different patents that have been awarded for our business, some of which we may get the time to cover as we walk through the presentation today, and we'll go from there here on in. Okay, so again, just to further distill some confidence in our business, I said we cover about 70 to 80 different sectors in the businesses we support, but you can see on the screen some huge brands, global businesses, organisations, but we support everything from large corporate organisations with thousands of business locations around the globe down to small businesses. We've all got the same challenge in respect of managing the reputation of the organisation. It's important at every level of business, if you like. And of course, you can hopefully see on the screen many different sectors are covered off. We are prolific across the ones that you would probably guess in hospitality, retail, automotive, where big finance purchasing decisions are being made. Of course, lots of people are doing their research and take lots of this serious in respect of it. So hopefully as a starting point, that gives you some confidence in our stock and an ability to advise on this space. As I move into the section which we've entitled Digital Trends, now I guess it's just about setting the scene here. Of course, it goes without saying in regards to online reputation management, the internet's changed everything in the way in which consumers interact with a business. And probably the point that I'd probably make is that we as consumers ourselves are consistently switched on. Whether it's we're searching for the next holiday, the restaurant we're likely to visit with family, the research in respect of the car that we're going to purchase, we're always switched on and checking information, things that we can consume from an online perspective that are going to influence our decision. If we start to think about this, I guess more in the context of how things have changed, if we go back to around the 50s, then we would probably suggest that any and every business would have control of their brand in the way in which media would work. Then if we start to progress forward to the boom of social media, we would perhaps say that there's joint control, with information being readily available for anyone and everyone to see in respect of the profile of that business. If we fast forward again to try and consider the concept of reputation management, the point of consumers controlling this, then that would be a suggestion on the basis of a business that is not taking the time to take stock of how their business is represented online, the feedback that consumers are leaving, and taking the time to do something about it. So as we've stated, the world has changed completely in regards to what we need to be considerate of in respect of how our business is online. Now, the point in respect of this, we talk about marketing being hyperlocal. If we probably went back to the 50s, we would probably consider one brand and how that brand was represented. Now, I'm just going to use the example of quite a large business within the UK and start to consider the task in hand for this business when it comes to managing their reputation. So if we consider this particular business has got somewhere in the region of 1,700 pubs, restaurants and hotels, if you consider that in some senses they've got a presence across probably 15 or so different review sites, social media platforms, business listings, and then if we consider that each and every one of those sites or across the board, there's probably about 50 pieces of feedback, you then start to consider the scale of the task in hand in respect of 1.2 million points of branding, just with the simple math across the board. Now, for a business of this size, and actually businesses a lot smaller, it does become extremely difficult to potentially manage this environment without deploying technology. And that's what I'll get into today in respect of our solution and the journey that we've been on and the advice that we would give to anyone trying to manage this space. Now, if we consider next as a starting point, and just following on from the last slide, there's so many different places that consumers can go online and feed back to the business, engage with the business, expect a response from the business. Now, from our perspective, we've worked hard over the last 8 to 10 years or so to build up integrations with these organisations. It's sporadic feedback, it could pop up at any time, and it could be in a combination of places. So it's vitally important that you as a business and we as a software platform have the integration so that we can bring all of this feedback into one consumable place so that the customers can be interacted with and start to be managed. Now, if I start to build that out a little bit further, and if I talk about, I guess, our vision of online reputation management as a starting point. Now, everything that we consider in respect of our vision starts with the customer, okay? And the fact that that customer could start to consider, or will consider actually, to communicate with the business in many different environments, okay? So they could choose to rant at you on a review site. They could choose to, engage with you and ask a question about open hours or whatever it may be on social media. Of course, they could choose to complete a customer experience survey program that you've got ongoing, or in fact, they may choose to leave feedback in store. They may choose the call center. Now, the concept of online reputation management from a reputation.com point of view, it encompasses all of this. And the point of our solution and what you need to consider as a business is how you make all of this feedback instantly accessible to the business so that they can have a two-way conversation, ultimately to ensure that consumers and the experience of the customer is the best it can possibly be. And therefore, that feedback then becomes a true representation of what appears online about that organisation. Now, from our perspective, we underpin all of these points with what we think you should be considering in regard to that customer engagement, if you like. So the ability to be able to engage, monitor and respond to this feedback from all the different environments. Hopefully it goes without saying that once you've got all this feedback, it's extremely important to be able to take the positives and the negatives and learn from the sentiment that consumers are going online and leaving. And then the final piece of the puzzle is not to lose sight of the promotional element of this. These customers that a majority of the time may remain silent, there needs to be a way as a business to be able to draw out that feedback so that they do become brand advocates and don't remain silent. And therefore, the feedback that exists online, it isn't disproportionate and it is a true reflection of the business for which you actually are. Now, to draw a conclusion on this, of course, there's different elements of what exists in regards to online reputation management feedback that will probably be of importance to different parts of every business. Of course, from a marketing perspective, they're going to be considerate of how the brand's being represented online. It could be poor star average or whatever it may be. From a customer relations point of view, then, that department is probably considerate of, are we responding to the feedback? And if so, are things improving? Are things getting any better? Now, from an operational point of view, that part of the business is, of course, going to be interested in the learning aspect. Our operations as slick as they could be based on the feedback that we're receiving from a customer perspective. So as a broad overview, that's our vision of how we see this environment and all of the things that maybe need to be considered when setting yourself up for success from an online reputation management perspective. Okay, so moving on then, I'm now going to go into probably the chunkiest section of the presentation when I'm going to break down I guess, into 3 steps of how we see the best way to set yourself up for success. So stage 1 is all about organisation of your data. And what we're talking about in that sense is the organisation of the business data. We talk about a core platform, but essentially that's just one environment for you to understand how your business is represented from an online point of view. Listings is all about, again, in the online world, where is your business represented and have you got a sense of how your business is represented. And then the final piece of the puzzle on step 1 is a reporting element. It's important as straight from the get-go that the business understands, I guess it's KPIs, the things that it's going to concentrate on in regards to managing this space. So you've got a consistent place to go and report upon to see and benchmark yourself against what you were setting out to achieve and whether you're en route for that. Point 2, or step 2 if you like, is all about being in a position, as I've just mentioned on the last slide, to engage with your customer base. Whether it be in a review sense, from a survey point of view, or social media, you've got to set yourself up for success, to not leave your customers without a response in this environment. And then the final piece of the puzzle is to improve. Okay, to improve overall customer experience through what you can learn from the insights that are being left online, through complaint resolution, if you like, in a ticket creation environment, and of course, within the world for which we live in today, is ensuring that this engagement that you have with the customer base, you're mobile, everyone's active, so it's the ability to be able to easily adapt and engage with this. So as we start to work through each of these stages, there's a bit of a theme to the way in which I've broken this down. So I'm going to kick off with a challenge in respect of the challenge in hand, or the task in hand for a business. I'm then going to work through essentially what we see as a possible solution, and then, if you like, a potential return on investment consideration for each and every one of these steps as we work through. Okay, so I've kicked off with a challenge in a well-known brand that everyone, I'm sure, will have known and have sampled Costa Coffee at some point. My accent's probably coming through loud and clear, so I've chosen a store in Liverpool just to stay close to my heart. But what I've pulled here in the visual is just straight from the Costa website. Okay, and the example for which I'm about to pull out is that if I just start to highlight this location information, which of course is very important to consumers if they're going to gravitate towards that business. And if we start to think about this from a search perspective and the actual journey that a customer may go on, then it's possibly highly unlikely that they're going to go to the website. What they're likely to do is they're likely to do a search via their mobile device, okay? And the search that you can see on screen is one via Google, which we all know and love, of course, and then another one via Apple Maps, okay? Now, if you look closely, what you can start to see is inaccuracies in their data, okay? Whether it be inaccuracies in the address, inaccuracies in their opening hours, and so on and so forth. Now, all of this, of course, presents a customer with many challenges, okay? They could be gravitating towards the coffee shop and it could be closed, which is going to cause frustration, potentially lead to a complaint, a negative review online, and so on and so forth. So the starting point in respect of organise your data, this is exactly the challenge that a lot of businesses I speak to on a daily basis are faced with. Google as a search engine, Apple I've used as an example, you can consider Facebook and many other listing sites. They will all buy in data should they wish to. Of course, consumers can suggest edits, so it's extremely important that you start to, I guess, first and foremost, monitor this space. And I'm going to walk you through kind of our take on this now, on some important elements when it comes to trying to solve this puzzle, if you like. So as a starting point, we would say build a complete and single source of truth, one place for all your data. Okay, so in our environment, you can see some of the key elements for which we've highlighted, location name, the address, the phone number, a website URL included, the hours of operation, and of course, some brand presence by way of photos or videos. And that's across the entire business. So it's important to consolidate and have one data place where all of this information is kept. Now, I've also put a note on there to say 60 plus other fields. There's lots of places to consider where the data will exist online. And that's the reason for I guess, many considerations for other elements, whether it be, a long description, a short description of the business and the services for which they offer. So it's important to consider. So that's the starting point, is to ensure that you've got your own house in order. Is what appears on your own website and the data you have internally correct? Okay. Once you're at that point, we're then into stage 2. In respect of this, and then it's about establishing and distributing your listings across all of the important sites like Google, like Facebook, like Bing, like Apple Maps, to ensure first and foremost, I guess, you've claimed the pages that exist online. If they don't exist, then you've created them. If there's any duplications, then you want to make sure that you've gone through that and solved that problem. Then it's about being able to put yourself in a position where you can consistently audit the information to ensure that what you have as that single source of truth is an accurate reflection as appears in all of the environments to which consumers will be gravitating towards on a daily basis when they're considering coffee shops near me, or automotive dealerships near me, hotels near me, whatever that sort of zero moment of truth is in the mind of the customer when they come to be switched online. We then move to the final piece of the puzzle. Once you've established this and you've almost done that clean-up exercise, if you like, it's about continuous remediation. I speak to businesses, as I mentioned before, on a daily basis about this challenge, and sometimes there's confusion in that businesses think, right, okay, this is a one-off exercise. I'm going to get all my data correct. I'm going to push it and maybe manually update all these sites, and then that's it, we're good to go. When in actual fact, the task in hand and the challenge, because the data can consistently change. As I mentioned before, these sites will continuously buy in data, consumers can suggest edits, so it's important that you've got what we would call consistent or continuous remediation to ensure that you're constantly staying on top of this environment so all the data is accurate. Okay, so if I move into the final piece of stage one, which I've called the online reputation management return on investment, if you like, and this is drew from a case study of ours that we did end of 2016, 2017. Now the context of the case study is we were managing as a starting point 250 location listings, so it's essentially 250 profiles of a business online. And what we were effectively doing is step 1, 2 and 3 in regards to this organise your data phase. So we worked with them hard to ensure that we had a single source of truth. We then done all the deduplication online, created the different listing sites, and then it was just about constant remediation. Now the return on this is a significant increase in visibility, okay, and this concentrates very heavily from a Google perspective. So what this particular business seen was an increase of 45% in views on Google. Now, hopefully most on the call today would possibly be aware that Google's a trust engine, and therefore if there's inaccuracies in the data of a business, so if what they hold is inaccurate when they check it against a number of different trusted sources, then they're less likely to optimize it highly in search results. So straight away this business seen a 45% increase in views via Google because it was optimized better. That also transcends, as you would expect, into an increase in a follow-through from consumers when they've been able to view that business. So an increase of 85% of clicks through to their website from Google My Business, an increase of 45% in calls, and then finally an increase of 30% of clients asking for driving directions. And this is simply all a follow-through of managing the accuracy of what is your all-important data that consumers need to gravitate towards your business. Okay, so just conscious of time, so we're going to swiftly move on. We now move to stage 2, and we're going to follow the same process, which as a starting point is the challenge, the task in hand. So the first thing to note, and hopefully this resonates a little bit more after I covered in my introduction, the fact that consumers can leave feedback in many places. I've simply just done a brand-related search on a potentially well-known restaurant in the centre of London. And the point I'm trying to make on this is when you look at this brand-related search, and this is the same for many businesses, is that the search results and the things that are optimizing are generally review and feedback generated. So what you can see in this set of search results is stars appearing everywhere. Why? Because consumers are obviously clicking on the links, they're consuming the feedback, and they're utilizing it to make a decision on this business. They're leaving feedback, and therefore it becomes optimized very well from a search perspective. So first and foremost, the challenge once again from a review perspective is that consumers will leave this feedback in lots of different places. So the consideration is how are you going to be monitoring that? How are you going to be alerted to the feedback that's coming in? How are you going to engage and respond to the feedback? The second point to make, and we've got surveys as a box at the bottom, if you like, is not every consumer will be happy to go and, I guess, put their online profile in an online perspective. But, of course, their feedback is valuable when it comes to online reputation management. Or even if they do choose to leave feedback in the third-party environment, as we would call it, whether it be Google or TripAdvisor in this scenario, or Facebook, for example, then sometimes in being able to solicit that feedback by way of an internal survey is a good opportunity to try and take a proactive approach to online reputation management and try and gain some further insight into the experience of that customer. If we then consider the final point on this particular challenge, I would cite sort of social media as a starting point. I've just used Facebook as an example, and of course this year they relaunched the Facebook local app, which now allows consumers within that environment to search for a certain service in a certain area. And I think we must be up to somewhere in the region of, I don't know, 1 point something billion users consistently on a monthly basis within Facebook. So again, it's become extremely important to be managing social media at a local level as opposed to just a brand level. So in a similar way to search with Google, there's now a consideration from a Facebook point of view. So if we move into, I guess, some guidance from a solution perspective, the starting point, as I've just mentioned, is how do you monitor all of this? Of course, you could try to do it manually and go into the native environment. Our guidance would be try to get away where you've got a direct feed of all of the feedback, wherever it may exist online from a review perspective, coming into one place, okay? Of course, you want to be alerted to this feedback so that you can do something. If it's a negative experience and something goes online to that extent, you want a quick way to be able to interact with what is potentially a customer that may never use the business buy the product ever again in the future. In regards to being able to respond to feedback, of course, within some sectors in the UK, the volume of feedback that exists within a review environment has become very high, so it's extremely important that you put yourself in a position to be able to quickly and efficiently engage with a customer. So what you can see on the screen is the possibility of a consideration for you to start to build out perhaps introduction templates and outro templates so that you make it a lot easier potentially for people, operators at a location, to be able to respond and just concentrate on the meat, if you like, in the middle, to be able to answer any questions that a consumer's got in the review or feedback pertinent to the complaint, whatever it may be. Then the final piece of the puzzle in regards to reviews, what we will find again and again and again, unless from a review management point of view, you've got a facility or a process in place to engage with your entire customer base, what we generally find is what appears online is disproportionate. It's never really a true reflection, because a lot of the time we will always find the consumers who shout the loudest are generally the ones who have had a negative experience. They're the ones that feel most enthusiastic, and yet there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of people that have had a great experience that just go about their day. So our guidance would be find a way to, I guess, build out what you can see on screen is review request templates. Try to find a way where you can give a customer an opportunity to leave feedback in a number of different places where that's going to help the business present a true reflection. So whether it's an industry-specific review site, perhaps like TripAdvisor, or whether it's the more generic ones like Google or Facebook, you want to be building out the templates to give consumers an easy way to leave feedback on the service or the products that they've purchased at every opportunity. Okay, so moving on in respect of the solution, I mentioned right off the bat in regards to surveys that some consumers may not want to leave feedback, or perhaps it's a good way before they get to the point of shouting at the business in social media or on a review site to be able to engage. In regards to a solution for this, it obviously needs some careful planning and consideration. As a starting point, you need to be able to take stock of what questions do you want to ask, what do you really want to ascertain, what do you want to understand as a business, and start to learn from the consumers as they've experienced the service for which you provide. The second thing to comment when thinking about a customer experience program is our guidance, and there's generally worry about this in most businesses. You don't want to be over soliciting feedback. But what you don't want to do as part of your survey program is lose sight of not being able to take all of these fans and garner their feedback in one of the important review sites. So we would say find a way to encompass within your survey request a way to, I guess, navigate the customer as a finishing point to one of the review sites so that they can also share their comments online as well for the whole world to see, and almost become brand advocates, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in the presentation. once you're in a position and you've took stock of considering the questions you want to ask to support your business, and also ensuring that you're not over soliciting feedback, if you like, with the review sites encompassed, it's then just considering the customer journey and ensuring as a business that you've got everything covered off. So thinking about how a customer moves through, and whether it is an email send that will best work for you, whether it's a text message that's going to work best, or actually whether it's face-to-face feedback, so that you've got data securely flowing through your organisation and incepting with a customer at the optimal time to garner the feedback for which you can need to start to improve as a business. As we move on to the final piece of the puzzle in respect of the solution, we concentrate on social media. Now, as a starting point, I guess it's a little bit like reviews. Gone are the days where we've perhaps just got one social platform. There's many to consider now, so it's important as a starting point that you put yourself in a position where you've got some way of encompassing all of your social assets, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Google+, YouTube, right across the board, to ensure that you can monitor the comments and interact with the customer. The second thing is goes without saying, obviously, to ensure that you've got a good social presence, there needs to be a consideration of how you can create your content, and with so many different platforms, how you can very easily distribute that content, especially if you're a multi-location business. Okay, so to start to think about how perhaps one post can be distributed not just across all the different social media platforms, but perhaps for the different social presences that you have by location. If we're taking into consideration the Facebook local thing that I mentioned earlier, then that becomes very important. As a final piece of the puzzle on this, over the years, social has become more and more important from an advertising point of view. There's very granular detail that's held within the different social platforms. You can get great insights in regards to what's working, what's not working. So the ability to be able to quickly boost, whether it be for a certain region that your business is based in, or in fact just on a certain post, it's extremely important again that that's a consideration to build out the best possible reputation for your business and followers and so on and so forth from a social perspective and from a community management point of view. Okay, so if we start to build out, I guess, the return on investment in this space, again, a small excerpt took from a case study, a wide case study, which I'm going to cover off in a little bit more detail later on. But what this part of the case study looked at, if we think about, I guess, what is widely known as the Google Snack Pack. So let's say, for example, I've done a search for a certain service in a certain area. So, I don't know, hairdressers near me, restaurants near me, hotels near me, whatever it may be. Now, what we looked at within this case study is we looked at the impact that reviews were having on the likelihood of a business appearing in the top 3 spots of the Google search. So what you can see with the table here is on the left-hand side of the axis is the percentage of the opportunity, of the potential, or the likelihood, if you like, of the business appearing in the top 3. And then what you've got across the right is of the axis is just the volume of reviews. So rather than covering each and every one of them, what you can see on the far right is that if a business had 5 times plus more than the local competition within that search result, then they were nearly or a little over 40% more likely to appear in that top 3. And what we did find in that case study as well, and this was across multi-industries, if you like, or many sectors, is that volume was the biggest influence and factor as well. Because, of course, negative could be a turn-off, but if there's lots of volume, consumers are speaking about it, and therefore it's obviously of interest to someone else in Google's eyes. So super important. In respect of surveys, I guess it's potentially pretty obvious, but for a business to operationally improve, it needs to truly understand what the customer thinks of the product that it's purchased or the service that it's received. So in being able to, I guess, solicit specific questions and being able to benchmark your business on certain areas of service or certain aspects or certain products that you've provided, then it's extremely important to run that survey program in that way. And the return on investment for me here is being able to drive operational insight into the business, I guess, to impact the behavioural change mechanism so the business can I guess, improve for the better. The final piece of the puzzle is just to call out some stats. I think I got them a little bit wrong earlier, but I've called out Facebook, 2 billion users each month, Messenger, Instagram, and also Twitter. I just find it phenomenal. So for me, the return on investment is to be managing your business in these environments in the best way possible, gives you the best possible exposure to an audience of this magnitude, which I'm sure everyone would agree and know of is huge. Okay, moving swiftly on then, so we move into stage 3, which is improve customer experience. As a starting point, I mentioned straight off the bat that the feedback or the customer interaction could appear in many different places, okay? And from an insight point of view, a lot of this feedback is potentially unstructured, okay, and possibly sometimes unsolicited, so it becomes really difficult for a business to make sense of that, okay? And also from a complaint resolution point of view, if you've not got all of this coming into one stream, how can the different departments deal with this as well? So the biggest challenge for me in this final section is that the feedback could come from anywhere, which is difficult, so it's important to be alerted to it first and foremost, and the mobile aspect comes into it. From an insight point of view, it's unstructured, so it's trying to make sense of that through text analytics. And if you're going to resolve complaints, it's important that you've got a way of feeding this through to the relevant individuals in the relevant department so that you can get a positive outcome from that perspective. So if we start to walk through, I guess, the solution from our point of view, first and foremost, from a learning perspective, it's important, as we would with any customer, is to set your stall out, okay? To start to think about the setup or the makeup of your business, the products and services that you provide, and what you want to track. You know, is it keywords? It may be that you're a restaurant, and a big red flag would be anyone talking about food poisoning. So whatever the priorities are for you as a business, perhaps could be connected to your core KPIs, the things that you want your representatives concentrating on. It's important that you set your stall out at the start when you've got, I guess, verbatim feedback that's not structured, that you've got some text analytic capabilities that allows you to drop the feedback into buckets so you can start to understand and learn from the feedback that's being left as a business. What we then consider is we break that down into 3 different components, if like. The first one that I've called out is operational insights, which essentially in our world is about giving the business the opportunity to improve operations, okay, to understand a certain process that a customer might have been through and the things that you want to flag so that you can start to improve as an organisation. The second thing to note would probably be traffic insights. I mentioned right at the start in stage 1 that the all-important accuracy of data and the impact that can have from a customer point of view and them gravitating towards the business. I presented some figures that show an uplift after managing that data, but there's many other things that can be useful in consuming this data, and Google and Facebook are probably the best at sharing this type of information. But things like, you know, the times of day that the business is getting the most calls, there may be, you know, feedback that's telling you that people aren't answering the phone quick enough. So it's important to take stock of the insights that exist within this environment. The final piece of the puzzle, and for me this comes, I guess, towards the very end of an online reputation management program, if you like, is competitive insights. I think, of course, it goes without saying you want to get your own house in order and ensure that you're working at the optimal level and the presence of the business is presented in the right way from a reputational point of view. But when you're at that point, most businesses that we work with that come to this stage are definitely interested in seeing, you know, how do we compare with the 2 restaurants that are on the same road, to see what things perhaps could be improved from a competitive point of view. So that's as we cover off. If we start to then move in to a solution base from, I guess, what we call tickets, but essentially is complaint resolution. The starting point for this is to ensure, again, there's a process for, let's say it's I don't know, it could be a 1-star review that talks about something serious, a slip, trip or fall or racism. There needs to be a way, I guess, for the business to monitor this. So to be able to create a ticket, if you like, or a way of tracking this feedback. It could be a negative survey, it could be a comment that comes in via social media. It's important to have some form of control over this, so it perhaps doesn't get lost in a telephone call between colleagues or an email between colleagues. So we use what's called a ticket environment to be able to create and assign a ticket. Once you've got that, and again, dependent on the size of your organisation, for effectiveness on this, if you like, it's important that there is complete visibility so that anyone who needs to take part in this can track whether that complaint's being resolved as a business. We then move on to the final piece of the puzzle, and I guess this is probably an obvious one, but the way in which we work today, I guess the expectations because of social media and how mobile and how active we are, I guess the overarching point in regards to a solution is to try and ensure that anything and every aspect, if you can, as part of your online reputation management solution, you can make it mobile. Putting the power, I guess, in the palm of the hands of the operators who know most about the customer experience, so that if feedback is left, they can react very quickly to a review or a survey. They can monitor, if you like, the overall presence or the reputation of a business, so that they do feel engaged within the program and feel part of the consistent improvement in regards to managing the online reputation of the business. Finishing piece of the puzzle in regards to, I guess, the return on investment. What I've pulled together here by way of a visual is a true representation, albeit it's anonymised, of how a program would generally work. Now, what I would point out is up to a certain point, you can hopefully make out on the screen that the star average of the business across thousands of locations is not very consistent. It's quite low and it's wavy, and what this represents is kind of a disproportionate sort of non-management. And then what you get is you get this kind of consistent level of the business. Now, what I would say the game changer is, as you get to this stage, is that will generally maintain, okay, until you start to implement what we have called stage 3, which is improve, because it then becomes small gains. It's then how you learn and improve customer experience, because you're already past the point you're now engaging with your whole customer base. It's then truly understanding the feedback that's being left, reducing the amount of complaints of certain aspects of the business, and being able to interact more from a mobile perspective. So at this point in time, it is really about small gains through actually improving the overall customer experience as opposed to just managing. As a final piece of the puzzle, this has been around for a long time. That was a Harvard Business Review that was done quite a few years ago now. But what this study found was that actually 1 star in an online presence of a business could lead to a 9% difference in revenue. And I guess hopefully now that we've gone through this today, that's potentially pretty obvious. You know, for businesses operating at 4.5 and all of a sudden drops to 3.5, then you would expect less and less consumers to be encouraged by the service or the products that are being provided by that particular business. Okay. So as we swiftly move on, I'm just conscious of time and want to try and get to a point where we at least get through all the content. I'm going to quickly move into the case study. So if I just give you the context of the study. So it was actually done across the automotive sector. It was done across 3 years. It was done across nearly 3,000 dealerships. And what we actually, this was a customer of ours, what we had the advantage of is we actually had their sales data, which we were able to map to the reputational metrics that we hold within our platform. And one of the key metrics that we covered this off and mapped it against is one of our patented technologies, if you like. It's our reputation score. Think of this a little bit like a credit score. So it's on a 1,000-point scale. Hopefully you can see straight away on that 1,000-point scale we give an industry average and a best in class. And then we also produce a score of the business as a whole or an individual location of that business. Now this algorithm concentrates on many components to do with the reputation. As you can see, it looks at star average, but across all of the important review sites, it looks at the volume of reviews, how recent those reviews are, the length that someone's gone to leave feedback. So rather than just 5 stars and a thumbs up, it's a lot more pertinent to another consumer if it's 5 stars and all the reason why. Review spread, so not just concentrating on TripAdvisor, of course, concentrating on the presence of the business across all. The response rates, search impressions, so what's positive and negative appearing on that first page in search, the accuracy of data, and social engagement scores. Now, hopefully with everything that we've gone through today, you can see that that's pretty much encompassing a lot of the things that are important when it comes to the online profile of the business. Now, to swiftly if you like, go through this, what we first seen is we map that reputation score to the business locations, okay? And for each and every business location, they have a reputation score, of course. Now, what you can see on the axis on the left-hand side is the number of, or the average number of sales in online leads that were being driven into the business. Okay, so locations with higher scores have higher sales, higher conversions of leads coming into the business, and the volume continues to increase at a faster rate. So what this proved is those with a 500 plus score, hopefully you can see at the top, they were achieving the most leads driving into the business at the highest and fastest rate as well in respect of it. Now, pushing on from this, those who were actively engaged, so what we were able to do is we were able to compare those dealership locations from the automotive business that we were working with that were actively engaged and those that were inactive. And what this suggests is those that were focused on managing their reputation, seeing spikes in their scores and was growing over 40% faster than those that were not actively engaged. Now, what this next slide shows is in respect of the online source leads, and I'm not going to labour the point, but for me, this just shows, I guess, and proves, it's continuing to become more important to manage your reputation, because if you can see between 2014 and as we get into 2016, the gap, the percentage and the growth per the business locations is growing. So as online reputation management becomes more important for businesses and consumers, the gap between those that are winning through being actively engaged with an online reputation management program and those that are not continues to grow, or continues to widen, if you like. Then for me, a couple of money shots of the case study. So as I suggested right at the start, the data was based across 3 years, across 3,000 business locations, some actively engaged and some not engaged. Now, the ones that were engaged in year one, they seemed somewhere in the region of about half a car sale per month, okay? But by the time they were getting to year 3, they were up to 2.4 more car sales, okay, compared to those ones that wasn't actively engaged. Now, you can probably see this was a US case study based on the dollar sign, but I'm sure most businesses would bite your hand off for an increase of nearly $100,000 per year for just engaging, responding, requesting feedback to then translate what is a true reflection of the service that's being provided of the business onto all of these online platforms. Final piece of the puzzle in respect to this was once again how this mapped to our reputation score, and this is basically just suggesting that those with increases saw a sales rise of about 6% over a 6-month period just through managing their reputation score, where you obviously had the opposite from a decrease in those sales. So just as a finishing piece of the puzzle before I open to the floor for any questions that anyone might have, and this is really just to kind of highlight what we've gone through. So I'm sure a lot of people on the call today and businesses around, they're spending hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions on marketing spend on a daily basis. Now, from a reputational point of view, we kind of suggest that it's a toll road now. Of course, you're driving consumers towards your business through all of this marketing spend, but actually it's depleting unless you're managing that toll road that sits in between, which is the presence of the business from a reputational point of view. Now, our overarching conclusion on the reason, if you like, for managing this entire space, everything that we suggest begins with you having a complete and accurate presence of your business online, okay? If you find yourself in that situation, then it's proven time and time again, and Google have come out and said it now, that you will appear higher in search rankings. Of course, if you're appearing higher, that will lead to more customers. From more customers, you can glean more feedback, therefore driving deeper operational insight into the organisation. So improved customer experience can happen, which should result in more happy customers, leading to a more attractive online presence. And so the cycle continues over and over and over again. And it just becomes, I guess, business as usual when it comes to the aspects of managing your online reputation and the rewards that you can reap. So, I'm now done. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to dial in. There are things that you can download online as well following the session, which the guys will point you towards. But I can now open up, I think, for any questions that there may be.
Yep. So we have about 10 minutes left. So if anyone's got any questions, now's the time to jot them down into the questions from audience box. So I'll start off actually. You mentioned a few times around how reputation is impacting SEO. How are you seeing that happening
So yes, I mean, from the case study that I've just gone through, there's a lot more detail that sits behind that. And in fact, we can firmly say now, because Google have come out and suggested that, the volume of reviews, whether as a business you're actually engaging and responding to the reviews, they've all come out and stated that's impacting from an SEO perspective. And of course, hopefully with the case study, some snippets I shown actually give some sense and some proof. The biggest impact that we've seen in our research to SEO, if you like, was actually the volume as opposed to the star average and the response. All influencing factors, but the biggest influencing factor that we've seen from the research that we've done was the volume, the actual volume of feedback.
What feedback do you get? Irrespective of what the star rating on that feedback is.
We've seen that volume. So there it just becomes even more important to ensure that you're soliciting feedback from the entire customer base. Because, hopefully most businesses would be doing a good job, and therefore you would expect to see, 80-90% of feedback to be positive in respect to that business. I can see there's been a question left. Does this only take in reviews and social? What about comments left in random forums, etc.? No, again, there's hopefully, as you can probably appreciate, there's not time to cover absolutely everything in the presentation today, but from our perspective, we absolutely take that into consideration as part of what we would call our social environment. We split it into two. One we call social media management, where we give businesses the opportunity to manage their pages, the pages that they own, their own assets. But then we also have social listening capabilities, where it will absolutely just hook onto and listen to news feeds, forums, blogs. But that's more about understanding what keywords the business wants to listen out for. There can be, in my opinion, a lot of white noise that exists online, a lot of feedback that perhaps you can get too involved in that, and it's not going to allow the business to operationally improve, which is the whole point of doing that side of things. So it's important to ensure that you set yourself up for success, in my opinion, when it comes to social listening. Nail down the things that you want to listen out to in blogs and forums and so on and so forth. So hopefully that answers the question in respect of reviews and social.
So do you use text mining then to pull out the sort of key phrases, the keywords and such like, and then categorise that into positive, negative and such like?
So we will use text analytics. And we will, at the start of any relationship with any business, we will, through years of experience, what I should say is we're pretty experienced in understanding for certain sectors what's important to them. But then again, it's about working with that business to understand what's important to them, what do they want to list out for, and being able to read, or teaching computers to read rather, the information that exists online, and being able to drop it into the buckets, as you said.
And if we take that to the next step, so with things like Siri and Alexa, how is that then impacting, so sort of voice reviews, if you like, and how are those impacting people's online reputation?
I think that's a great point. I'm not a big fan of talking to a machine just yet, but my wife's a big advocate of it. She does it regularly. And if we just think about that environment and the technology for a second, unlike search, where we can be given lots of different businesses listed to choose from, something like Alexa can't list everything. So we're likely to do best restaurant near me. And you're probably going to be, I was going to say presented with, you're probably going to be given an answer which gives you 1, 2, possibly 3 maximum businesses. And of course, the algorithm of those technologies need to run off something, and it's therefore running off what is the best. And the only thing that we've got that's tangible as of today is the feedback that past customers are leaving in respect to that business, with it being the best.
Okay. And are you actually seeing that being the case, where any brands you've worked with can actually demonstrate that because they've managed their reputation better, they're therefore more likely to be...
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well,
probably more experienced in suggesting that's been the outcome from a search perspective, through the studies that I shared before. A little less so than voice just at this stage, but absolutely seeing signs of that as well. And if you start to think, we talk about Alexa, but then if you start to think about technology that's now in cars, and how that's true. That's changing. Whether
find me a restaurant to the next destination.
Where's the closest petrol station? We're using the obvious ones. It could be, something of an emergency. I'm going to run out of fuel, taken to the next petrol station. So anything like that, again, could be an influencing factor on this. And of course, proximity is important. So I can't sit here and state that everything that's driving that search is down to reputational points.
But it's going to have an impact.
But it's going to be an influencing factor, I would make the point of, Yeah.
So my own background is CRM, and this is ORM. How do those two things interact, do you think, in terms of where CRM and ORM overlap effectively?
It's a really good point, to be honest, and I think it's an extremely important one, and lots of our customers, it forms an early part of our discussion. If you consider that, step one, which is all about organisation of data.
Same in CRM.
Exactly, without a doubt. So kind of there's lots of comparisons from that perspective. As part of any program that we do, generally speaking, we'll be looking to integrate with the CRM provider for the business that we're going to be working with, because generally speaking, data needs to flow between the two, whatever your online reputation management program is and the software that you've got in place for that. And of course, the two need to interact. The best businesses take the time to put deep integrations in place so that not just feed information, or rather data is being fed from the CRM system to, let's say, solicit feedback, but also it's coming back the other way. So let's say if a negative review is coming in, let's say it's creating a case within the CRM system so that the entire business becomes more efficient in its approach to managing this environment. Hopefully that.
Indeed, and again, that sort of leads on to another question: is where does the ownership for ORM sit within the organisation? The CRM tends to sit within marketing. Is ORM customer service, or is it marketing, or is it is it another department, if you like, within businesses that are tending to own this?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I can't say. I mean, we work with nearly 500,000 business locations around the globe. And certainly from a UK or European perspective, I couldn't honestly say it's specifically, sits with one particular department. I generally find myself having a conversation and deploying the project with a number of key stakeholders in the business. I think, as I mentioned straight off the bat, marketing are definitely going to be interested in how the brand's represented and wanting to drive more feedback to ensure it's a true reflection of the service that's being provided. But it goes without saying the customer service team are going to be probably the ones that are responsible for taking ownership of responding and engaging with the customers to manage things through to resolution. And then, of course, you've got operations, or whether we call it sales, or whatever you want to call it, different departments. So from ORM as a whole, it probably broadly sits across the business, especially in the way in which we consider it. I think in the UK, some businesses have got that silo mentality, and they perhaps, when you talk about online reputation management, maybe they just think reviews, maybe they just think social media. For us, it's what we aim to deliver is a full turnkey solution that encompasses anything and everything that could be, I guess, customer engagement, customer experience. Because in the world for which we live in today, a lot of that will translate and attach itself to the presence of the business from an online perspective.
And does that make it harder to find someone to speak to within the organisation to try and convince them this is the right thing to do? I suppose, that if you've not got a single point to go to, that makes it more difficult. And also, what are the sort of barriers that you find? Because a lot of your evidence is really compelling, but yet not all businesses are doing this.
I think it goes without saying, in the UK, probably a few years behind the US marketplace, that this is still an educational space, and businesses, in some senses, are still trying to figure out. I never get any pushback from anyone suggesting that this is not an important area, because it's a customer at the end of the day. It's a customer that's used the service, that's decided to engage. I just think that the challenge, as I see it as of today, is we're potentially still in that educational phase. Businesses are still trying to figure out, well, how do I bring all this together, and what is my strategy for managing this? And I think you're right. I think for us, sometimes that does mean that the process from going from A to Z, if you like, from consideration of an online reputation management program to actually deploying it and to getting to stage 3 can take some time. But the starting point for most businesses is relatively quick. It's an easy question to answer. Is customer feedback important to the business and being able to engage with that customer? I've never had anyone say no to that. And if the answer's not no, then for your business, you need to do something about it today, because the majority of consumers are choosing to go to a review site. They're choosing to go to social media when they want to engage with your business more and more.
Thank you. That's a really nice place to leave it. It was a lovely summary of today's webinar. So,
thank you.
First of all, thank you very much. That's been a really interesting and enjoyable hour. I mean, there's lots of stuff that we pulled out during that hour or so. I think the key thing, as you just said, is that brands are now in the hands of the consumer, and there's so many places the consumer can go to leave reviews or feedback or fill out surveys or whatever it happens to be. And I think the other bit that you mentioned within that also is about encouraging people to give feedback, because if you don't, you end up with those two polar points of the really good stuff and the really bad stuff. And actually, a lot of the time, it's the bit in the middle that's really important. And your structure in terms of organising the data, engaging and then improving, I think, is a really nice way to look at it, and that's come across really well, which has been really good.
Thank you.
And the point you made a couple of times, 1 star leads to 9% in revenue. That should be a compelling outcome for everyone. So if that's the last thing we take today, then that's really good.
Okay.
So thank you very much to Anthony and Reputation.com. Just a quick reminder that the webinar will be available on the DMA website, and we'll send you out an email with details when that's available. And the PDF is available for download from now. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day. Thank you.